My name is Carmen Mazzara, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs, or APSIA, as we call it. I'm delighted to be sharing this presentation with Oxfam's Change and Club leaders. I am a big fan of the work that you do, so I'm glad we can share a little bit of wisdom with you all. And as I said, we are recording this presentation, so if you have questions, please feel free to post them in the chat box. I will read them aloud so that they get captured, and then we'll have the link for everyone else later on that you can share, watch again. I'm also happy to share the copy of these slides with you. So however we can be of assistance throughout the presentation or afterwards, please feel free to let us know. So with that, let's get started and share some best practices in applying for graduate school. We suggest that you begin the discernment process, the planning process, about 12 months before you want to enroll. And at that time, it's really important, I would argue, to cast a fairly wide net, to think broadly about the kinds of programs you want to pursue, and really start to do your research and your digging to see which ones actually make sense for you. This is also a good time to start to keep track of all of the pieces you're going to need. So it could be a spreadsheet, it could be an app on your phone, it could be a piece of paper list, whatever it is you need to do to keep track of all of the deadlines and all of the moving pieces. Start at the very beginning so that you can make sure when the time comes that all the right things go to all of the right places. We also suggest that even as you begin the discernment process for what program makes sense for you, start thinking about your financial situation and investigating your financial aid options. Unfortunately, a lot of folks get to the end and they get accepted and they're all excited, and only then do they start to think about how they're going to pay for a particular grad school. So we really encourage you to do both at the same time as a way to make sure that you're really set up for success when the wonderful, amazing, crazy day comes when you get those acceptance letters. You're ready to pull the trigger and pay for school and have those pieces in order. So as you think about the discernment process, we suggest you ask yourself 5 questions. The first is fairly straightforward, but a lot of folks miss this, which is, what is it that you want to study? What do you want to master with this particular program? And we encourage you to think about the academic structure of the program. How flexible is it? How prescriptive is it? What kinds of courses do you have to take? What sorts of things are you able to take? And how is that going to meet the goals that you have? So if you have a broad set of interests that you're really trying to marry together with lots of different things, a flexible program may make a great deal of sense, because then you can pull all of those elements together. Some programs are really going to be prescriptive and say, first you have to take this, then you have to take that, and so on and so on. So understanding what it is you want to study and what kinds of things you want to get out of the program are going to be very important as you search through and look at the different programs and core courses and electives that are offered. None of that has anything necessarily to do with the degree name. So those two things are really different. Looking at what kind of structure the program has is much more important, I would argue, than whatever it is that your degree is called. Secondly, looking at the admissions criteria, which most schools are going to publish on their website. They're going to publish averages, and so it's very important to understand that, and that it's not a specific number that's going to get you in or keep you out of a particular program, but understanding how you're qualified relative to those typical numbers for students who are admitted into their programs. And that way you'll have a sense of which schools are a bit of a stretch, which schools are really solidly around the level of qualification that you have, and which schools you're going to be a little bit more qualified for and a little bit more competitive for. So having that be part of your discernment process can also just help shape which schools you think are a really good fit and which schools you know are going to be a bit of a stretch or a bit of where you're going to be in the top percentages. Another key piece that folks often miss is looking at the non-academic factors. So thinking about where a particular institution is based. If you love a big city and you couldn't possibly imagine not being in a place with the heavy pulse and all of the rat race and that kind of thing, Going to school in a really rural area is something you need to be ready for and plan for, and perhaps not apply to schools in particularly rural areas. And likewise, if you hate city living and couldn't possibly imagine living in a place like that, then looking at a school in New York or Paris or Tokyo or DC may not be the right fit for you, even if you think you're, quote, supposed to be there. And we can talk a little bit more about that too later if you like. But packing in and incorporating all of the living environment factors that go into a school, because theoretically you will not be in class all the time, are also a key piece of this discernment process, because you're going to spend at least 2 years of your life somewhere. So make sure it's actually someplace you want to be, and that's going to set you up for success in all of these other elements of your life. We've talked a little bit about the financial situation, and you'll hear that throughout the presentation. But knowing what your financial situation is, knowing what your comfort level with debt is, and building that into the process now doesn't have to pull schools out of the consideration process, but definitely changes the way you look at schools and changes the discernment process as you think about which ones you really definitely want to apply to and which ones you might be a little bit more on the fence about. But I would argue the most important question on this list is, what is the professional fit? What is next after you've mastered whatever it is you're going to master? And even if you don't have a specific job in mind, starting to think about reading job descriptions, understanding what the common skills are that are required of the kinds of jobs that sound interesting and sexy to you, and then holding that up against the kinds of opportunities, the kinds of classes, the kinds of faculty, the kinds of typical career paths that a school has, and using that as your measuring stick, using that as your litmus test to start to steer you towards some programs and perhaps away from others. So far from the name, far from where all of these kinds of factors that students get caught up in, understanding what the program really looks like and what kinds of opportunities it's going to create for you, to me, that's the most important part of this discernment process. And we really suggest you cast a wide net at this point. As we get a little closer, as we're about 9 months out, now is the time to start to focus in on more of those core schools that are of interest to you. We encourage you to start to reach out, talk to the admissions teams. And here at APSIA, we give you lots of different ways to do that and start to understand what it is that they're looking for. A really savvy question that we encourage students to ask is about the priorities of the admissions committee. No school is going to say, well, if you write this, then you'll definitely get in. But you'll start to get a sense of what it is that the committee is looking for, how they evaluate applications. And so you'll know both what about yourself to draw out and highlight, but also if the kinds of things they describe sound like a person that you cannot stand to be around, this is also an important part of the discernment process. What kinds of things are the committee looking for? Is that you? Is that the kind of person you hate? This is, again, a way to sift through different schools and get a sense of where it is that it makes the most sense for you to be. 9 months out is also a great time to start to think about where your application might need to improve relative to what the different schools are going to be looking for. If they have prerequisites or classes they demand students have or require students to have, if you're going to have to take standardized tests, doing all of that 9 months out is a really good way to not only cross those off your list, but if you need to do any of it again, you still have enough runway, still have enough lead time before the application is due to repeat those things in order to put the strongest application forward. We also suggest at this point you start to cast the net broadly and gather up your application materials. Close to the deadline, a lot of things are going to be due, so the more you can knock out now, the easier life will be for you later. So as you think about that, what kinds of things do schools typically ask for? I cannot stress to you enough that the list on your screen is an example, and every school is going to vary. So please read what they've actually asked you to put forward. Please look at what they want you to provide and follow directions. But on the whole, the kinds of things that schools typically look for include an application form and an application fee, a CV or a resume, and they are two different things. So please be sure you know which one it is that the school actually wants. And if you have questions about what the differences are, we can talk about it. Most schools are going to ask for transcripts from every institution you've attended. So this can also be an important thing to knock out early. So if you directly enrolled in an institution when you studied abroad, you're going to need those transcripts. There's a pretty good chance. So ask for them now, because if you have to call the University of Madrid, there's going to be a time difference, there's going to be a bureaucracy difference, there's going to be all of those pieces. So start to work your way through these things now, and that way you won't have to worry about it quite so much later. Many schools are going to ask for a standardized test, although a lot of schools are moving away from them. So again, be sure you know what's required of you and what's optional. And then you're also going to need to put together a personal statement or topical essays, and sometimes both. So the sooner you can begin to think about those different pieces, the stronger they can be. We also know that a lot of schools are going to ask for letters of recommendation. Again, it's important to follow directions. So if they ask for academic letters, those are going to come from your faculty. They might ask for professional letters. They might not care. They may not specify what kind of letter you'll need. But this is a common thing that you're going to have to think about as you put your application together. So the sooner you can do it, the easier it will be on you. And then in a lot of cases, you'll also need bank statements, particularly if you're applying for financial aid. So all of these pieces are just common elements, but again, be sure you follow what the school has asked for specifically in order to make sure that you get considered appropriately for the school and the program. So after you've cast this big wide net and you've started to focus in, about 3 to 6 months out is when we suggest you really finalize that list of desired programs and you start to focus on creating the materials that they specifically have asked for and that make sense specifically for them. 3 to 6 months out is also a great time to start to pull together those things that you know you're going to need but can knock out early, like updating your resume, requesting those transcripts, starting to outline your essays and personal statements, reaching out to recommenders, making sure they have a sense of what you need from them, what the deadlines are. 3 to 6 months out is also an important time to continue applying for all of that financial aid. You might need to you might have deadlines for outside scholarships. You might need to start working on paperwork for the school's financial aid process. Whatever it is, this is really when the rubber meets the road and when you need to start moving forward specifically on the schools that you're interested in. 3 to 6 months out is also a good time to retake any of those standardized tests, those prerequisite courses, whatever it was that you started at 9 months out, and really move that forward to put together the most competitive application. And throughout this process, you're going to need to be in constant touch with your recommenders. You're going to need to be in touch with schools that you've asked for transcripts from, all of these different pieces. This is really the maintenance time to start to rev up the engine and move forward. So we've talked a lot about personal statements and essays, but this can be the most difficult part for a lot of people. So we wanted to share some insights into what we hear as puts together the most high quality personal statement. First, of course, answer whatever question that they've asked you. Again, this is basic, but you'd be amazed at how many of your colleagues cannot handle that. But if it is an open-ended question talking about you or talking about your motivations, we really encourage you to think about it in 3 parts. Think about who you were, what volunteer experiences, your time with Oxfam, your work, your study abroad, whatever it was that happened in the past that shaped who you were and now influences who you are. What is it that you want to study? Why do you want to master that particular topic? Why do you want to go to grad school now? Not 2 years from now, not 2 years ago. What is it about this moment in time that is really shaping and driving you forward? And then talk about who it is that you want to be. Why that particular school? Why that particular program? You don't necessarily have to say, well, 10 minutes after graduation, I'm going to have this job and my life is going to look like that. But they want to see how their program is a springboard into this future version of yourself. So who were you? What shaped you? What kinds of experiences drove and motivated you to influence who you are now? And how is who you are now a setup for who you want to be in the future through this particular graduate program? So that narrative of who you were, who you are, and who you want to be is really something that only you can put forward. And I can tell you, our colleagues are going to read thousands, in some case, thousands and thousands of applications. So the more you share with them a story that only you can tell, the more you really stand out and the more you have a distinct place in this pile of thousands of applications that they're going to be going through. And I would argue that your time as Oxfam change leaders and club leaders is going to really help, particularly with that who you were and who you are piece. And we can talk a little bit about that later. But that really can set you apart as students who've worked on global poverty issues, organized, been trained in these key issues, done advocacy. There's some really distinctive elements you can draw out that hopefully influence whatever you want that future version of yourself to look like. So just 1 month out before the application deadline is the culmination of all of this work, all of this discernment, all of this planning that you've been doing. So this is the time to finalize your application and make sure it looks the way you want. Now is the time to finalize all of that outside research you've been doing on scholarships and financial aid. You need to check in with your recommenders and make sure that they are on track to turn everything in by the time you need it. You need to also keep updating all of your financial planning, and all of these pieces come to that wonderful, scary, terrifying, amazing moment when you submit all of the stuff you've been working on that, as I said, is the product of this research and this discernment that you've been doing. So it's a good day. It's a bit of a scary day, but it's a great time to feel like you've accomplished something because you've been through this process of thinking and planning. Again, this recording will be available later on APSIA's YouTube website, as well as the slides if you would like them, and my email address will be available at the end if you'd like to request them. If you have questions as we go through, please feel free to put them in the chat box and I can take them at the end, or if it's something pressing to what we're talking about now, I can take it now as well. So you've submitted all of your applications, but before you do, we encourage you to avoid some common mistakes. I would argue these are simple things, but these are things that get a lot of students excluded. And when you're reading 1,000 applications, or in some cases 5,000 applications, a student who doesn't do the basics, it can be really easy to just dismiss them. So if you want to make sure your application is at least considered, do some basic things like follow directions. And so if it says, send me 3 letters of recommendation, don't send 5, don't send 2, send the 3 that they asked for. Again, basic, but you'd be amazed at how many people cannot handle that. You'll also, in most cases, be able to check on your application and make sure that all of the things you think you sent were received. But we encourage you to ask for extra copies of external documents like transcripts or letters of recommendation, so that if you check that site and it says that they don't have what you think you turned in, you can easily turn it around and upload it rather quickly. So at a basic minimum, please follow directions and don't be someone who gets excluded from consideration for something that's simple. We also encourage you to proofread, to make sure that someone else reads your essays, reads your statements, not only for typos, although yes, please, for typos, but to make sure that the version of yourself that you want to put forward, the version that you're trying to explain to the committee, is what comes through. Because for the most part, this is all they have to understand who you are and what your motivations are. So ask someone else to see if that version is what shines through in the documents you've submitted. But also, in terms of making foolish mistakes, make sure that the right documents go to the right school. I can't tell you how many of our colleagues who are trying to apply to George Washington University, Georgetown University, and Georgia Tech University get all of their documents mixed up. And so I had a faculty member tell me they were reading a really interesting essay about how badly a student wanted to go to Georgetown. The problem was the kid was applying to George Washington because he hadn't been careful enough to put the right documents in the right place. So again, these are avoidable things that I encourage you to avoid, and make sure that even if you're applying to all 3 of those schools, you do one final check to make sure the right essays and the right statements go to the right place and the right school. In terms of other common errors that students make, I think it really is about that discernment process. What is it that you want to master and why? Why are you doing this program? What are you hoping to get out of it? So you need to have an honest self-assessment to think about your skills and your experiences and your interests and what it is that's driving you to this particular time. Students should also be honest if there's something in their academic history or their personal life that is influenced and perhaps negatively shaped the way something is going to come across in your transcripts or in your essays. So if you, let's say, had a really bad first semester, whether it was because you just had difficulty transitioning to college, you partied too hard, you had a family health emergency, whatever it is, I encourage you to share it. You don't have to overshare, but they're going to be able to see it in your transcripts. They might be able to draw it out of your essays. So talk about it. Be straightforward about it and say, yes, I had trouble, but look at the success that I've been able to have since then. Look at how I've turned that experience partying too hard into really refocusing and getting double committed to fighting global poverty, whatever it is. If you're not sure where the line is between oversharing and discussing something straightforwardly, again, this is where having a relationship with the admissions committee can be really helpful. You don't have to tell them what it is, but you can feel them out and get a sense of what they would like to know and what's absolutely none of their business. So if you have had these kinds of experiences, share how you've grown if it makes sense, but then also just be honest about it because they're going to be able to see it in all of these documents that they've requested from you. So you've put together this high quality application, you've got great letters of recommendation, you've been through the discernment process, you've turned everything in, but unfortunately your work still isn't done. First, you have to make sure that the school got everything that you think you sent. Sorry, team. There we go. So yes, make sure that everything you think you sent has been received. You also need to thank all of the people who wrote letters of recommendation for you. Make sure that they know how much you appreciate the effort you've put in. You also don't know who they know in the process, so you want to continue to be grateful to them. And you don't know when you're going to need them again, so be sure you stay on their good side. Your financial planning is unfortunately also not done. You need to keep up looking for outside scholarships, keep up with all of the deadlines and the dates that might be required for financial aid, and make sure that that particular part of everything also keeps moving forward. And I also encourage you to continue to learn about the programs that you've applied to. My hope is that all of you get into all of the programs to which you've applied. And so at some point you're going to need to make a choice between them. And so really continue to learn about them, continue to see which one is the right fit, continue to figure out who's got a structure that makes sense for you. All of those questions that we started with at the beginning, continue to ask yourself, continue to push on them and get more information so that you can really make a great choice when the time comes. A common question that I get is, what is it that schools are looking for? And everyone's going to tell you, oh, it's a holistic process, but it really is. Schools want to see your chance for academic success, your aptitude for study. And that's why they want to see your transcripts. That's why they might ask for academic letters of recommendation. That's why they want to see a writing sample. They want to make sure that you are set up for success in their program. And they also want to see that you are set up for success professionally. The P in APSIA is for professional schools. So these are schools that are really looking towards future careers, practitioners, being contributors in the space. And the space is quite big, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But they really want to see your professional possibilities. So again, that's why they want professional letters of recommendation. That's why they're going to ask for your resume. That's why they might ask for an essay that talks about those sorts of things. They want to make sure that you are ready academically and professionally to succeed. But they also want to see how you can help others succeed. What experiences, what perspectives do you have, and can you contribute into the classroom that's going to elevate everybody else's chance for academic and professional success? So again, telling that distinct story, talking about the things that only you have done, who you were, who you are, and who you want to be. That really helps to separate you and make the case that your perspective should be in their classroom. So it really does cover a lot of different areas. It's not just one specific number or one specific thing that makes you in or you're out. They're really trying to paint a much broader picture than that So I encourage you to give them the tools they need to see you in that painting, to see you in that broader picture. We've talked a lot about the need to think about financial planning in conjunction with application prep. But I know that this is something that weighs on a lot of students. And so what I wanted to stress to you is that there are lots and lots and lots of different ways to pay for a graduate education. There's school-based aid that might be need or merit-based. And even among need-based aid, there's a pretty good chance that there is more need than aid. So some of it is going to come down to merit and the case that you make. So again, this is why putting together a really strong application is so important. There might also be things like research assistantships, which are exactly what they sound like, working with a faculty member to do research. There's teaching assistantships, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's working with a faculty member to support the teaching in a class. But all of these different things, merit-based aid, need-based aid, research, teaching assistantships, all of these things, some of them are going to be grants, so money you don't have to pay back. Some of it's going to be loans, money you do have to pay back. So be sure with any of those options, you understand what's being offered to you and what the terms and conditions are on that money. When I was in graduate school, I was offered a teaching assistant position, but with it came the condition that I couldn't work more than X number of hours per week. Well, I had a full-time job in graduate school. So I wasn't able to take that teaching assistantship because it paid less than my full-time job, which I was using to pay for graduate school. So I had to read the terms, I had to read the conditions to make sure that I understood what was being asked of me. And I strongly encourage all of you to do the same. It's also important to note that schools have lots of different pots of money. So some financial aid may be available on the school-based level, but some of it might be available on the central university level. So again, because you've had this relationship you're building with the admissions team, it's reasonable to say to them, I would love to go to your institution, but I can't. Might there be a little, I can't with the current financial aid package that's put forward. Might there be another pot of money, maybe on the central university level, for a student like me? And so if you've got a relationship with that school, perhaps they'll go looking on the central university level and find some funds that would not have been available otherwise if you hadn't asked and if you didn't have this relationship. So you can push a little bit on your financial aid package and see if they can go out and look for some other pockets of money, even within the context of that university. There's also lots of external sources of funding that are not bank loans. Bank loans are there, but there's grants, there's scholarships, there's lots of different opportunities to think about how to pay for graduate school, even outside of what a particular school or a particular university is going to be able to offer you. Some of those examples are linked to what you would like to do after graduate school. So things like the Pickering and the Wrangle and the Payne fellowships are linked to your professional life afterwards. They're linked to careers in the State Department. The Payne Fellowship is linked to a career with USAID. So this is about what you want to do when you're finished. And it provides funding for graduate school and then a job in one of those two agencies. Something like the Coverdell Fellowship is linked to what you do between your time as an undergraduate and your time as a graduate student, particularly if you join the Peace Corps. And for those of you interested in international development, Peace Corps can be a great way to get some on-the-ground experience outside of just picking up and moving or waiting for a job that's going to send you overseas. But coupled with time in Peace Corps is funding for graduate school. So both of those can be related to what you do after you're a student and what you'd like to do professionally following graduate school. Some graduate school funding is simply linked to your citizenship. Anyone who is a member of a country that is part of the Organization of American States, so any of you who are US nationals, for example, or the OAS, the US is a member of the OAS, and so US nationals can compete for OAS graduate scholarships. Similarly, it might be related to your ethnicity or your heritage. If any of you are Latvian American, the Baltic American Foundation has funding for graduate school scholarships. So thinking about yourself in lots of different ways, thinking about your gender, thinking about your race, thinking about your ethnicity, your citizenship, your geographic location, students from the Midwest, whatever it is, conceptualizing yourself in lots of different ways And then looking for graduate school funding for people with those characteristics can be a way to identify pockets of money you might never have known existed, but are there for students just like you. And if you can't find them any other way, this may seem crazy, but you can put in Latvian American graduate school scholarship, put it into Google, and you'll turn up things like the Baltic American Foundation that are possible. We also have a list of fellowships and scholarships on our website that you can filter through. But even if you exhaust that list, like I said, Google sometimes might even get you some opportunities that you would never have known about otherwise. For those of you who are juniors or younger in undergrad, there's even things that you can do while you're still in school. So something like the Public Policy in International Affairs program couples intensive training in things like quantitative analysis, policy writing, economics, and they match that with graduate school funding. So there's things you can do now, there's things you can do in between undergrad and grad school, there's things you can do to plan for your future career, and then there's things that are just linked to who you are as a person, where you were born, and all of those different traits. But as I said, there's lots of ways to pay for graduate school. These are just some examples of different ways to think about finding those pots of money. So as you think about your professional life and what you want to do after graduate school or even in between, I'm sure you all know this, but the field of international affairs is gigantic. It's a huge interdisciplinary field with lots of different avenues. Most of you, I think, would know the traditional fields like diplomacy, and development, and defense, but there's huge demand for international affairs professionals in energy, in the environment, security and intelligence, science and technology, education, communications, business, law, human rights, the field is huge. And so there's so many different opportunities to bring your interests together in many different ways. And I'm happy to talk about that later too. But the field is tremendous, and international affairs touches so many different aspects of our life that you can really build a varied, successful, fulfilling career with all of these avenues or just some of them. And as I said, I'm happy to talk through a little bit more what that might look like if you like. But whether it's looking at graduate school or looking at professional opportunities or any others, there's several things that I encourage you to do to think about being competitive for these opportunities. The first one, of course, is getting professional experience, ideally international experience. Could be a job, could be an internship, could be service time abroad, something that shows you have worked in a multicultural context and have worked in this space. I also encourage you, especially now while you're students, to think about how you can clearly and concisely express all the things that you know in written form and orally. So learn how to write well, learn how to speak comfortably in front of groups of people. And I know this is something you all practice when you do your trainings for the Change program. But if you, no matter what you know, if you know everything there is to know about a subject, but can't express it in those two ways, it doesn't do you much good to know all of that. So if this is something you need to work on, do it now so that you're ready when it comes time to apply for graduate school, when it comes time to apply for those jobs. Understanding something like project management is also key. How an idea becomes a reality, how you move a project from point A to point Z, how you get the money to do all of that. And this, again, is a great way to use your Oxfam training, and we'll talk about that in just a second, but show me that you can accomplish something. Show me that you don't just talk about things, you know how to translate that into a reality. And finally, to be competitive, you really need to think about the network of people around you. It could be supervisors at work, at your work study, at your internship, at your job. It's your peers. It's the other people in your group, in your network. It's your classmates. It's your faculty and professors, whether it's through a particular program at your university, professors you've never had in class but could go visit during office hours. All of them have information and intelligence that you can use. Whether you're in the discernment process for grad school and saying, I'm looking at this and this, do you know anything about that program compared to this one? Whether it's for jobs, there's lots of opportunities that cross people's desks all day long. So thinking about all of the folks you know and all of the intelligence that they have and how it can be of service to you is a key piece also of being competitive in this way. But in particular, I think that your experience with Oxfam really tees you up well to be competitive in each of those areas. You've been working with people from lots of different walks of life. You've been working with people from all over the world. To have this shared advocacy experience, to have this common thing both on your campus and worldwide. So that gives you that cross-cultural adaptability, the opportunity and the ability to work with others who are different from you. And so that's really something you can showcase in a cover letter, in a grad school application essay. I am sure in the course of your work with your club or as a change leader, things have gone wrong. And so you're able to talk about those experiences. You can showcase how you've been flexible, how you've bounced back and been resilient in a particular area when something didn't go the way you wanted it to. All of those are really tangible things that I, as an employer, would love to see in a cover letter. Grad schools like to hear about as a way to talk about the experiences you can bring into a classroom or the professional success you're teed up for, all of those different pieces. This also links to maybe linguistic ability as you've worked with folks from other places or you've tried to communicate with those in your area who are from different languages and cultures. So again, it's a way to showcase your abilities, the exact experiences you've had and how that translates into useful skills for your professional life. Clearly, there's a lot of process management in what you all have been doing, in the projects you've put forward, in the people you've organized, in the different workshops and trainings and efforts on campus. All of those different pieces give you the ability to not just tell me, oh yeah, I can take an idea and make it a reality, but you can show me what impact you've had, exactly what you did and what the results were, what you learned from that experience. All of those different pieces come together to make you really marketable and competitive in each of these areas. And then, as I said, you've had this multicultural experience, you've had the ability to show what you've done, you've had the ability to say, I competed for one of these spots and I got it and I got to be trained and go to Boston and learn all of these things and then bring it back home. So I was able to work in a context different than mine and then bring it back to my reality and thrive in both places. So there's lots of things you can unpack about your time as an Oxfam change leader or a club leader and really show me on a tangible level what you are capable of doing. So I'm about ready to move to questions, but I wanted to share with you some other places where you can gather more information. You see my email address on the screen, and if you have any questions or things that you aren't comfortable sharing now or just want to do some follow-up, please feel free to reach out to me. APSIA is also active across social media, so you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, YouTube, where we have lots of different videos, on LinkedIn, where we share opportunities all the time. We have a number of events, both online and in person, that you can find at the events link on the page. We also have that filterable directory of fellowships and scholarships that I mentioned, profiles on more than 65 graduate schools around the world. We have members and affiliates in 18 countries, so you can read a little bit about them and what they do and see what might be the right fit for you. And then as you start to think about all of the different career options that are possible, we have an international career guide where we give a little profile of different sectors, suggest some employers, suggest some tips for you to be competitive, and provide lots more information on all of the different things that you can do with an APSIA degree. And I'm starting to see a few people type, so yes, please put those questions in. We'll be able to take them in just a second. But finally, I wanted to invite you to our series of graduate school fairs. This is a great way to start to build those relationships, to get your personal questions answered far beyond what some website or some brochure is going to say. It's really a good chance for you to start to connect with schools. Maybe schools you have no idea who they are and what they do, but they just sound interesting. So this is a great way to learn and begin the process. It's all free. You can see on July 25th is our first event of the year. It'll be online, so wherever you happen to be, you are welcome. And then in September, we will be in DC and New York, Toronto and Atlanta. And then in November, we will be in Tokyo, Hong Kong, Seoul, and then back online. So please feel free to find us wherever we happen to be, whether it's virtual or in person. And we would love to connect with you and have a great chance to answer any questions that you might have. So with that in mind, please let me know what I can answer. Could be about letters of recommendation, careers, applications, which schools have the best underwater basket weaving program with a focus on social enterprise. That one I made up. But in general, happy to answer whatever I can. So Hillary says, if I'm interested in law and international affairs, should I pursue a master's in international affairs or apply to law schools? I get this question a lot, Hillary, and I would say it depends on what you want to do when you're done. There are plenty of masters in international affairs programs that have a focus on international law. So you would get a degree in international law, but not a JD. There are joint degree programs that would let you do both if you have the time and the stamina and the money. The caveat or the question I would put to you is, do you want to practice law? And I say that because with a law school program, I would suggest you look very clearly at the academic structure of that program and compare it to what your goals are. Law schools are typically prescriptive in the classes that you have to take. You have to take constitutional law, you have to take civil procedure, you have to take this, you have to take that. If those are building the skill sets that you want, great. If they're not building the skill sets that you want, if you don't envision yourself in a courtroom using a civil procedure class, then perhaps a Master of International Affairs that lets you build in some law classes or take some things at law school, or maybe is a degree in international law but not a JD, might be the better fit for you. So those 5 questions that I suggested at the beginning, this is a great way to get at making that choice between law schools and a Master of International Affairs. Because if the structure doesn't work, if the professional fit doesn't work, and if the financial piece doesn't work for one of those 2, that will really help you pick between them. And if that was way more talking than actual useful information, feel free to follow up in the questions and I can share a little bit more. So I see a few others typing. That is a common question. And again, there are joint degree programs that have, and in that case too, I encourage you to look at the structure. Some of them are going to happen at the same time. Some of them are going to happen concurrently. So you have to finish your JD and then go on and get your second degree, or finish your Master of International Affairs and then go on and get your JD. And that really is a personal matter about how much you think you can do in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. So it's really a very personal question about professional fit, goals, money, time, how much coffee you feel like you can drink in a single afternoon or over the course of 5 years of your life. So yes, please keep those questions coming. Happy to answer anything else. So Nessa says, are the experiences and qualifications you listed at the slide near the end some of the top ones grad schools look for, and what are some of the others, even if they may not link directly to Oxfam campus engagement? Again, I do think as we look at the skills to be competitive, the other ones that are not on here, but a lot of schools are going to be looking for, would be quantitative analysis, your ability to process data and information, communication skills, which is linked to writing well and speaking comfortably, but also relates to how well you can get your message out. Can you capture people's attention in a really crowded media marketplace? And I don't mean necessarily just in a traditional media context, but can you host an event and have people come to it? Can you put together a clear explanation of what happened and why? A lot of employers that I talk to really value that. And so grad schools also are looking for that ability to communicate to market, if you will, what it is that you know. So data, communications, I think also something distinctive, something that showcases a bit of personality in a positive way, something that helps you stand out. If you are application number 3005 and they've already read 3004 and they have 2000 more to go, what is going to help them remember you? What is going to help them want to come back to your application? So it doesn't have to be something dramatic like being a lion tamer, but some distinct narrative that really separates you from all of the others who are going to start with the same quote about changing the world or the same dramatic element. Really something distinct to who you are that helps them retain who you are in that context. So those are the kinds of qualifications and experiences, and it could be anything. If you were a barista for 2 years and now you want to go study social enterprise or supply chain management or agriculture policy, all of that is relevant experience that you can talk about. It's all of the kinds of things that you can showcase, so that those kinds of things can be great to talk about in your grad school application. You know, working at X coffee company really helped me think through the supply chain, and I wanted to influence change on the ground for farmers, and so I got really into fair trade and want to get your degree in social enterprise to go launch my own fully fair trade company, whatever. So anything can be relevant, anything can speak to this level of competitiveness if it's relevant to who you are and shapes what you are putting forward. So again, that was a long answer, but what else can I share with you? Things you've been wrestling with, things you've heard from other people that you wonder if it's true. How many of you are based in the States right now, and how many of you are off adventuring? A few folks typing. No matter where you are, obviously the internet will go there, mostly, at least I hope. Hillary is in California, north or south? I guess, is it cold there and rainy, or is it hot there and rainy? So we're lucky to have the ability to reach and connect with folks wherever they are, north that it's cold and rainy. Landy's in Florida, but she's not a US national. Landy, at least for our schools, that certainly doesn't matter. There may be some different paperwork that you would need to do. If you're studying at a US-based institution currently, you probably would not even need to take the TOEFL. It depends on the school. But if you're not, then you would just need to take the TOEFL and demonstrate language proficiency if you are not a native English speaker, I should say. And then the kinds of competitiveness, the kinds of opportunities are certainly still there. And then as on the job front, things are a little different and changing all the time. But I know many international students who find lots of successful careers in whatever country they want, whether it's their home country, the US, a third country where they didn't study, something along those lines. So lots of great opportunities to do good work. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions, but you all have my email address on the screen. So if you think of something later, please feel free to shoot me a note. I very much hope that you will join us and start to connect with schools. And you can even ask them, Hillary, should I go to your program or should I think about a law school? And they will tell you, oh, how wonderful they are compared to other programs. But I very much appreciate all of your time and for joining us here today. And I'm particularly grateful to Nessa for inviting us to this presentation. I wish you all the best with the rest of your day and keep up the wonderful work on behalf of Oxfam and fighting for global development and the people in the world who need our help the most. Thanks, everyone.